Hello everybody, in this video we'll start taking a look at working with brushes in Photoshop. And to get started I'm going to go to Create New, and I'm going to use the default Photoshop size, and I'll create. So the brush tool that we will be looking at today is found over here in our tools right here. The icon that actually looks like a brush. Now, if I hold my mouse down on that button, you'll notice that there are actually 4 different tools nested underneath this icon. There's the brush tool, pencil tool, color replacement tool, and the mixer brush tool. We will be looking at the brush tool. So if I grab my brush tool and I start drawing on my workspace here, I will get this. What I'd like to point out to you is these 2 color swatches here, a black and a white color swatch. The black color indicates the color that I'm drawing in, and the white color indicates the background. So if I were to change the foreground color, let's say I change it to a red, then I'll be drawing in red. Now, if I were to change the background color here, and let's try changing that to a green color, and I draw here, as you can see, it doesn't change anything. I'm still drawing in red because red is my foreground color. Now, if we were to take a look at another tool, the erase tool found here, it's this icon that looks like an eraser. Again, if we were to hold our mouse button down on it, you'll see that you actually have 3 different tools nested under this button: the eraser tool, background eraser tool, and the magic eraser tool. I'm going to use the eraser tool, and I were to erase, you'll notice that now when I erase on this layer here, that it appears that I'm drawing in green, and that is because I set green to my background color. With my eraser still selected, I'm going to double click on the green color swatch for my background color, and I will set it back to white. And now when I erase, it erases using the background color, which is white. Now, I'm actually doing something right now that I wouldn't typically do, and that is I'm drawing directly on my background layer. What I would recommend that you do is work in a layer that is on top of the background layer. So I'm going to use my marquee select tool, and I'm going to select the whole space here that I have, the whole working space, and I'm going to go to Edit, Fill, and I'm going to fill it with white, just to get rid of everything that I've done up to this point. Now I still have a selection here, so I will deselect it either by going to Select and Deselect, or using the hotkey of Control D. I'll use the hotkey combination Control D to deselect. This is very important. Sometimes people get confused when they have a selection without realizing it. I'll demonstrate that later. So I will create a new layer here. Right now you see I have my background layer. I click on this plus icon here, and it'll create a new layer, layer 1. And I will draw on that layer. Once again, selecting my paintbrush, I can start making marks with the brush tool. I'm going to change my background color again by double-clicking on it. I'll make it green again like I had done earlier. And once again, I will select my eraser tool and start erasing these red marks on layer 1. So I'll select my eraser tool and erase. Notice this time when I erase, the background is not green. It is not using this background color when I erase. Let's take a look at why that is. What I will do is I will hide my background layer, and you'll see that on the layer here, in fact, you can see that I can even move around the objects on my layer. This grid indicates that I'm not showing my background, that this is just transparency. So when I erase on the layer, I'm actually erasing what is on the layer and then what is behind it. In this case, the background layer shows up. It will not use this green color as the background color for erasing then. I'm going to select my brush tool again. Currently, it's set to red as the foreground color. So if I draw, I get red marks. But notice this, if I click on this little icon with the two arrows on it, it will reverse the two colors. It'll change the foreground color and the background color. So now green is my foreground color and red is the background color. I'll click on the arrow again and switch it back to red. Also, you'll notice this icon with the black and white on it. If you click on that, it'll set it back to the default of a black foreground and a white background. Previously, I mentioned a problem that people sometimes have with selections in Photoshop, and I'm going to demonstrate that now. The way I'll demonstrate it is I will use my marquee selection tool, and I'm only going to select a small area here of my workspace, and I'm going to delete it. So I've only deleted what I have here on this layer 1 within the area that I have selected. So I will select my paint tool once again, and notice that with this selection, if I draw in here, nothing happens. Or if I try to erase in this area also, I cannot erase outside of my selection area. I'll activate my paintbrush again, and if I draw this stroke, nothing happens until I get to my selected area. Same thing goes for the erase tool. Nothing erases outside of the area I've selected, but as soon as I start working within that area currently selected, it will erase. So this is a common problem that people have. Oftentimes they wonder why, for instance, they might have a brush and the brush is not working. It's oftentimes because they have an area selected. In fact, that area that they have selected could be very small, like this little area that I have selected now, and it may go unnoticed. So once again, I try to draw. I cannot draw because I have this really little selection right over here. So if you run into that problem, remember to just deselect. And again, you can deselect by going to Select, Deselect, or you can use the hotkey combination of Control D. Once I deselect, I can draw anywhere in my workspace or erase anywhere in my workspace. We'll now start taking a look at some of the settings that we can use to adjust our brush, to change the way that the brush tool works. I'm going to get rid of this layer here. I can get rid of it simply by dragging it into the trash can here. That'll eliminate that layer. And I will click on this plus symbol to make another layer, a new layer, to work on. I currently have my brush selected, and I can draw a mark on my workspace. What I'd like to point out to you is that there are a number of different settings for whatever tool you currently have selected. You'll see settings here for that tool. And we'll take a look at those settings now. The first setting we'll take a look at is if I click on this symbol here of the brush, and you'll notice that we can change the size as well as the hardness of our brush. Currently, my brush is set to 62 pixels. I can make that smaller. Or I can make it larger. In addition, I can also change the hardness of the brush. Currently it's set to 100%. If I bring it down to, let's say, down to 0%, I'll get a very soft brush. Or I can do anything in between 0 and 100. For instance, 50. I'm going to hide this layer, and I will create a new layer. We've looked at how we can change the softness and hardness of the brush and also the size of the brush. Here's what I have right now. This brush is currently set to 125 pixels, and it is at a 50% hardness. I'm going to show you another way that we can adjust the size of our brush by using hotkeys. And to illustrate that, I'll just open up this image of a keyboard. The two keys we're going to look at are these two here, the ones that look like brackets. This key will make your brush smaller. This key will make your brush larger. So let's try that out. Again, here's my current brush, and if I use the left bracket key, I can click that a couple times, make it thinner, or make it even thinner, or I can use the right bracket key and make my brush larger. Once again, I'll hide a layer and create another layer so that we can look at a couple other things that we can do with brushes. Let's take a look at opacity. So currently it's set to 100%. I will bring that down. Let's say I bring it all the way down to 10%. And maybe I'll make my brush a little smaller. And here's what I have now. Now notice that when I release my mouse, the left mouse button, and then I press the left mouse button again and I start drawing, I can get this nice layered approach where I'm layering on 10% brush strokes on here. This could be a convenient way to do some shading. I'm going to bring the opacity back up to 100%. And we'll take a look also at flow. Flow works somewhat like opacity, but a little bit differently. We'll bring the flow way down, all the way down to 1%. And this time I'm not going to release the left mouse button as I draw. I'm just going to use the brush and continue drawing with it. And you can see I can also get a shaded effect this way as well. Think of flow, as the name suggests, as the flow of the ink coming out of the brush, that it is constant. I'll bring the flow back up to 100% and return to this brush icon here. And we'll take a look at this here. So what I want to show you, let's see, right now it's round and you can see what my brush looks like. In fact, I'm going to also bring up the hardness of the brush so it looks like this. And I'm going to grab one of these handles here and adjust my brush. Perhaps I'll rotate my brush as well. And now you'll notice what the shape of my brush is, and if I use it, you'll notice I get this nice calligraphy effect going on. I'll hide this layer now, create another layer so we can look at some more features of brushes. I'm going to get rid of that calligraphy type effect on my brush, and we'll take a look at some of the other brushes that we can select. So you'll notice that here we have general brushes, and if we take a look at what we have available in here, you'll notice that we have a variety of brushes that we can select, some defaults. We've got the soft round, the hard round, and many others. We also have some other brushes available here, such as the dry media brushes, which you can also take a look at. I'll make the brush a little larger so that you can see it better. You have a lot of different brushes that you can explore and experiment with. I'm going to switch this back to a more standard brush. And we'll take a look at a couple other features. I'll hide this layer, create another layer. And this time we will take a look at this button here, this one that has a folder with a brush icon on it. If I click on that, we'll get this pop-up with brush settings and brushes. So here, as you can see, I can select a number of different brushes. A lot of choices there. But we'll also take a look at some other settings that we can use on these brushes to make our own custom brushes. So currently I have this selected, the brush tip shape. You'll notice that some of these are very familiar. We've looked at some of these different settings over here already. We can adjust the size. We can also adjust the shape of the brush. The hardness. And in addition, the spacing. hide this layer, create a new layer, and we'll take a look at some of these other settings as well. As you can see, there are a number of different parameters that we can work with our brushes. Perhaps to see these a little better, I will add some spacing to this brush. Let's take a look at what I have here. Okay. And we'll move on to the shape dynamics. Here we have a number of different parameters to play around with, such as size jitter. If I increase the size jitter, the percentage, 100%, you'll notice that we get some variation as far as the size of the brush. In fact, we can play around with some of these other parameters. If I once again add a more kind of angle to the brush, return to shape dynamics, and change the angle jitter, you'll notice that that will give us a whole nother effect. I'll make my brush larger so you can see that better. And I'll return it back to the way it was. I'll hide this layer, create another layer, and we'll move on to scattering. If I increase the scattering, you'll see what's happening here. Here, we'll do a stroke first without any scattering. Make my brush smaller. I get this. Increase the scattering. I'll get that. Adjust it to a smaller number. And I get that. So by combining these different properties of your brushes, you can create very unique and effective brushes. Before wrapping up this video, I would like to point out one more thing. While we won't cover it today, we will look at it in a future video. You'll notice that these different parameters, such as the size jitter, can also be mapped to pen pressure if you're using something like a Wacom tablet. We'll look at that in a future video, but this is a feature that really makes your brushes very intuitive and fun to work with. So that's a little bit about using brushes in Maya. Perhaps one other thing before wrapping this up I should include, and that is that all these settings that we've done for brushes can also be applied to the eraser tool that we looked at earlier. So I'll just fill in some of the space here with some marks and select my eraser tool. And you'll notice that we've got all these different settings for the eraser as well, so that we can get some interesting eraser effects as well. So I hope this video has been useful for you, and thanks for watching.